Hey, I'm Scary Alvarez, as you know, Wine Island enjoyer, Sherry Wine Destroyer, Jake Ferguson's grandpa, and Cindy's plus one, which will have me. And just want to welcome aboard a couple dudes, the CNC Football Factory today. Collin Wilder, former Wisconsin Badger safety, and some broadcast stuff now too. And he was able to kind of straddle a couple eras from Rose Bowl into COVID, and he's got some really good insight on the team. We also got Connor Whelan, who is believe it or not, a UW student, has a real nice hat collection there I see in the background. Um, Done some work for Bucky's fifth quarter. Now is working for the Badger Wire with USA Today. Welcome aboard to both of you.
Appreciate you having us on, Scary. We're ready to roll.
Yeah,
let's do this.
Here. Well, excited for
topics
this.
are hot, so I'm ready.
Yeah, we did it, and I started with Bon Jovi, which just sets the tone for a high stakes discussion. I just want to get right into it, and anyone who's listening to this podcast probably heard my most recent one, which, for better or worse, I recorded within an hour of the Maryland debacle on Saturday. It probably could have benefited from me doing it the next day, but I was a little raw, and I wanted to hop right on and go into how I was feeling. And to make a long story short, I believe in sometime in that game, I crossed the Rubicon of trying to explain it as everything but a possible Fick isn't the guy, to finally, I think I have seen things for how they are. And this is nothing personal. I just am now firmly on the side of I have serious, if not grave, concerns about Luke Fickell's ability to make this a winning football program for a number of reasons. We can get into that. I don't believe that I have a monopoly on the only correct position, but I want to orient the listeners and my guests as to where I am, and that's kind of where we started. I think a lot of people are suffering from on social media a little bit of Luke Fickell revisionism, is what I call it. I remember what the tone and tenor of the vast majority of this fan base, not everyone, Colin, but the vast majority of fans was when Fick got hired in November 22. It was euphoric. I'm just telling you, for the most part. And people like me who liked Jim Leonhard and had been an advocate for Jim Leonhard getting the position, I was swept up in it a little bit too. And it wasn't ever a case where I didn't think someone could do it. It was just, holy crap, this is Luke Fickell. This is National Coach of the Year. This is college football playoff guy. And we drank the Kool-Aid a little bit. So I want to start, and some of these are going to be kind of open to both of you, but we've seen the first 30 games of Luke Fickell's Wisconsin coaching career. And I have to just kind of get to the question on everyone's mind. Can Luke Fickell pull out of this tailspin that the program is in right now? Colin, why don't you get us kicked off, and we'll kick over to Connor after you're done.
Yeah, I think going back to when Luke Fickell was hired, he was obviously on paper the correct hire, the hire that everybody was excited about, that they wanted to see, the change probably with the type of hype that Luke Fickell had coming into Wisconsin, that all the fans were excited about. And you can probably even ask Jim Leonhard. I mean, on paper, Jim Leonhard would say, yeah, I mean, Luke Fickell's the right hire. I mean, when you compare and contrast their head coaching tenures, which Jim Leonhard was obviously shorter, but you put that on paper. I mean, yeah, Luke Fickell's a great hire. But there's so many other aspects that go into it when you hire a head coach, especially at the University of Wisconsin. Just kind of going back to what I said yesterday, Wisconsin's built on, really, to me, three main things, and that's the love for Wisconsin, building guys off of people who are passionate about the state, passionate about the program, and then the staff is relationship based, whether it is with the players, whether it's with the fans, alumni, whether it's with the janitor, the athletic training staff, the strength staff, whatever it might be. It is a relationship based program across the board. And that's how you get guys who may not be the 4 or 5 star guys, but they fall in love with the program and the process. And that's huge when the odds are stacked against you against big games that, Wisconsin's been excited and hopeful to win in the past. And then, the third thing is just development. We've developed guys here, whether they were walk-ons or underrated guys, and they've turned to great players who are now doing great in the NFL for a lot of those guys, right? So the frustrating part from there is you don't see any of that in motion with Luke Fickell. And some people may say that I'm biased, and I am loyal to Paul Christ. I'm loyal to Jim Leonard. If you played for him, you would think the same thing. But I'm also very realistic about the program, and I was very realistic about the program when I was playing there. And this is just not what Wisconsin is or what it was, and how it's been built. So I think that's the frustrating part, and what it comes down to for fans and alumni being a little bit frustrated with it.
Okay, and Connor, we're going to come to you in just a second with the same thing. And again, Colin, I don't want to put you on the spot and make you say something that's going to upset people, but I want to be real here. I mean, look, it's the 22nd of September. There are a ton of games left. Like me, if you looked at who those games are against, it's a little bit terrifying as a Badger fan. But I mean, do you see a realistic scenario? I'm not saying it's a non-zero versus zero. Is there a realistic scenario that magic that's missing? We're going to go into what that means and what that consists of. Can be rediscovered sometime between now and the beginning of December for Luke Fickell and his team.
The reality is it comes down to the leadership, whether it's the staff or whether it's the players, but they both have to come together and find that identity. Because we were 1-3 to start my senior year. We lost to Notre Dame, we lost to Michigan, we lost to Penn State. I mean, our best win was Eastern Michigan at the time. So I wouldn't say that we're in the exact same hole, but we're in a pretty similar mindset of, kind of where is this season going to go, right? And it comes down to the leadership, and it comes down to the coaches of getting them to believe in the plan for the rest of this season. And if you have a poor leadership in the locker room and a poor leadership that starts with Luke Fickell, then you're in for a very long season, obviously. And so I think that if they can find that within them and find that belief that they should win every game, regardless of who they're playing, if you have that realistic expectation of yourself of how good your team can be, then you have a chance. But if you stay in this hole, then you are going to be looking at another year of no bowl game and minimal wins. And this is an absolute gauntlet, the hardest schedule that Wisconsin's had in a long time. And it's a perfect storm for a really bad season if you let it happen.
It's tough. I mean, it's all well said. And I don't think it certainly doesn't make it any easier given the circumstances to be seeing teams like playing in Ann Arbor, playing in Eugene, Oregon, having the Ohio State Buckeyes probably going to be number one at the time we see them. Things that used to look like bye weeks, like Indiana, maybe that's a gauntlet of a program. It's just it's relentless. So Connor, kind of picking up on what Colin just said. I mean, can you see a scenario where, without getting into we'll get into the hows and whys of how it got here, but can he pull out of this tailspin? Fickle.
I think it's a great question. I think the good thing and the beneficial thing is that the schedule has so many opportunities that if they wanted to have a turnaround, the games ahead of them are those that could be program defining or tenure defining wins for Luke Fickell. I mean, home games against teams like Illinois and Washington, those teams might not be ranked at the time, but they'll definitely be those kind of teams that are receiving votes, and it's still going to be a good win that could kind of motivate the team to have some good momentum heading into the more important games like Minnesota, just because those are the rivalry games that I guess haven't been the same way since Fickell's got here besides his first season. I don't know how winnable these games are, but at least you have the opportunities on the board, which I don't know if you can always say the same for some of the Big Ten West schedules where that kind of became the issue. Whereas if you lose a couple of the big games early on that year, you wouldn't have too many opportunities to make up some, I'd say, crucial like ground when it comes to I'd say like program or like a season defining win. And even though it started off not the way you want this season, I think the fact that they have opportunities at home against teams like Ohio State and even road games against teams like Michigan and Indiana, the fact that they have the chance, even if it's a very minute chance, to upset and make something special happen, I think that gives him a little bit of potential for keeping that tenure going, even if it's a very small chance of that.
Yeah, it's all well said. And I think there is, us against the world is a sort of a flip of itself. The us against the world stuff can be used as a motivating, and as Colin knows this as a player, I mean, can be used to motivate you, but it also, the fact that it exists shows you how daunting the process is as far as going ahead. So, I'm not going to make any predictions about how they'll respond, but I will say we're 30 games into a tenure. And when you're looking for a sea change being necessary to take that leap, it is a little bit difficult to think that's going to happen. I'm a never say never guy, and I would never quit on a season in game 4. I told you, I explained the reasons for my sort of viewpoint change on how I regard Fickle and his future. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to be rooting hard for this team the rest of the way. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't embrace things I saw that showed progress. And it doesn't mean that I don't know the chances of this, but if things turn around, that I couldn't reevaluate my position. I mean, I'm a human being. I was wrong once. I can be wrong twice. I would love to be wrong about this. That would be fantastic. I would be the first person to jump on here and say, man, this is, I like everyone else. I missed it. I missed it on Fickle, in September of 2025. But I don't know, guys. So I'm going to stick with you, Connor, on this one. And these are all kind of related, but I'm going to try and parse this out. I had a poll on Twitter X. What is the biggest problem? Not what is the problem, because obviously these are multifaceted issues. But I had, is it a culture thing, talent thing, or an exo coaching thing? If you had to put one, I know they're unrelated, I just said that, but if you had to pick one of those three things that you think is the thing that's keeping the Wisconsin program down more than the other two right now, what would you say it would be?
I think, in my opinion, personally, I think it would be culture. And I think most people would probably say coaching. I think that was the answer that was the majority of what people said on your poll. And the reason I think about culture is I'm just thinking about why Luke Fickell had success in Cincinnati. And I'm just looking right now at, he started off 4-8, and the next year he went 11-2. He had winnable games at Cincinnati and was able to slowly but surely develop those players into the guys that he needed. And I feel like the issue now with the schedule and just how expanded the Big Ten is, there's not many of those games that you can try to get those guys some snaps, get them some reps, and get them ready for the next year. And I just don't think a jump like 4-8 to 11-2 is very sustainable or even possible anymore. Obviously, that can be proven wrong by other coaches in the Big Ten, but I still think that the culture itself is that I think Fickell himself was expecting the first couple seasons to be ones where he starts developing guys and get them ready for year 3. But the issue now with the transfer portal is you can't have guys take 2 years to develop, because if they don't get playing time in the first 2 years, they're just going to automatically go to the next school that offers them the biggest bag of money. And I think that's also another thing that could be a factor going into the end of this season, is that this is the first time, it feels like, during his tenure where he's coaching for a job. He knows that his job could be in jeopardy if he doesn't win games. So I think we could see a more aggressive and maybe less conservative side of Luke Fickell, and likewise from the players too. Nowadays, a lot of the people that players that might be part of the program won't be there if Luke Fickell is fired or resigns or whatever might happen. Those guys have to play their hearts out because they know that other schools are going to be watching them, and they need to put on a show to make themselves, I guess, attractive transfer portal targets. And I feel like it'll be an interesting thing to see throughout the end of the season how that culture shifts as Luke Fickell's coaching for his job and his job security, as well as the player is trying to see, hey, I want to have a future in the NFL, but I also want to have a future in college football. And if he doesn't play well this season, that could not be the case for some.
Okay, those are all really good points, and a real kind of a multi-layered XYZ axis kind of look at it. Colin, same question kind of back to you. And again, there's no definitive answer for this. This is more of a gut feeling based on what you know. Certainly you talk to people, you catch the vibes, you can see the body language. Culture, talent, or coaching? What do you think if you say the biggest problem for Wisconsin, the biggest fix right now of the three, which would it be?
Well, I agree with Connor. I think it's culture as well. The tough part is when you look at Fickell's past. Obviously he came from the Urban Meyer tree. I've played and coached under coaches from the Urban Meyer tree. I know what these messages are. I know how it works. And it's great for players that may not have to be developed, or from a program that may not have a stable foundation, like Cincinnati, right? It's never been necessarily a stable foundation with one coach that's been there forever. Cincinnati fans are listening. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but this program has a foundation, right? And when you try to copy paste a specific culture that you've had before and erase everything that's been built here from the past, that creates some issues in itself. And it's going to create a very, very slow development that you don't have time for to create here because it's been such a stable foundation here of what we've been, what our identity is. And I think the problem is too with this team itself is we don't have an identity. We don't know what we're good at. We don't know what exactly our mentality is going into every game now. I mean, there has to be some sort of identity when you go out there and compete on Saturdays, but also when you come into the building for meetings, lifts, whether you go, how you're handling yourself in class, like that mentality feeds into everything. And if you don't bring that every day, or if you don't have that every day, then you can't expect it on the field. So I think there's this copy paste of what they've been trying to do from what we've been in the past. It doesn't correlate. So there's a problem there. And, on and off the field relationship development wise, when it comes to players and development as a player, there's things behind the scenes, I think, that we don't see where there are some hidden issues.
I think that is I can't say it's true definitively because I'm not in those rooms, but like you, and probably not to the extent you do, Colin, but I do have, people with their ear on the program, inside, outside the program, and what I'm hearing, it gels very well with what you said. I'm not gonna quote unnamed people and stuff, but it's a very different room than it was. Like some of the things you described, you were talking to Evan Flood, Colin, where you could be watching film and a coach, even Chris, would come in and sit down with people, or he would be talking to the ball boys. And that's the family kind of thing that is, it's in Fickle's defense, it's very hard to replicate an existing family with a new family. So there were some challenges with an overlay. And I think certainly he said many of the right things in public, as far as we're just going to embrace what happened. But the vibe I had was that maybe in the locker room wasn't quite that harmonious. And that's just, that's maybe just a symptom when you're trying to keep certain players on that you like. Some of the best guys, obviously, most of the best guys that he had in his team in 23 and 24 were existing players from Paul Christ and Jim Leonard. So it's tough to – I have sympathy for Fickle, but I also can understand where there were missteps there potentially, and it's really tricky. And Connor, what you mentioned also, to give a little bit of quarter to Fickle, coaching and winning in 2025 is different, and it is more challenging in many ways. That coaching and winning in 2018 would have been the Big Ten West, not the least of which is the fluidity of the player movements and having to be a CEO, which and again, you know him a lot better than I do, obviously, Colin, but I never got the vibe that Paul Christ was enamored with the new landscape of college football. It seemed like he's such an X and O guy, get in the locker room, know your players, and he just, my perspective is he hated that whole thing, and he was not well suited to where this was going. Is that fair?
He's an old school guy. It would have been difficult for him to deal with the NIL. I mean, he gave so many walk-ons an opportunity to succeed at Wisconsin, and the walk-ons are gone, right? You're offering players money or else they're leaving. Like, I got out for the same thing. I mean, I didn't want to deal with that stuff with players wanting to just stay just for the money instead of embracing the program, wanting to play for a school that they loved. I mean, I don't blame him for that, for his opportunity to possibly struggle with that, because I know that that's hard, but he wasn't wired that way. And so, to your point, that it's true. So, at some point, how sustainable really was it? We don't know. But, this day and age, it's really hard to do at Wisconsin with the money that you're throwing at players, development in players when they can pick up and leave anytime that they want. Like that's not what Wisconsin has been. So the times of college football is difficult, but it's not impossible. I know Bielema had a rough game against Indiana the other night, but you see Bielema being successful still, though, competing. You see Indiana, obviously. I don't know what their resources are like, but you could probably compare the resources. You would hope that our resources are better than Illinois' and Indiana's when it comes to NIL and transfer portal.
I would hope that. I don't believe it to be true with Indiana. Right. I feel like they have more money. Yeah.
Well, it's possible if you can see some schools that maybe have been in the dumps for so long find their way back, right? And it all depends on the money that you have. You have to buy players these days. But if you can see some of those schools succeeding with maybe some more limited resources, it's not impossible here. So, That's where we got to find a way to do better and adapt very well. But, to answer your question, I mean, I don't think Paul Chryst would have adapted very well to the new era. I know sure as hell I wouldn't have.
Yeah. No, I get it. Okay, and this is one, again, I'm not asking anyone to name names, but if we're going to be honest about the state of affairs in the Wisconsin locker room and where this might go, we need to be honest about the same things we just talked about with culture, talent, and coaching. I'm going to propose something without being in those rooms, but what I'm observing, knowing a little bit about football, I am taking the position that there are some deficiencies in coaching talent at certain positions. I do not believe this coaching staff is uniformly as skilled as the ones Paul Chryst had. I'm not talking about Al Gay coaching running backs. I'm just, as a general matter, it felt like things were in better hands there. And he had such incredible coaches at Cincinnati with Denbrock and some of these other guys. And it's just, I wonder if that was part of his success, not just being in a non-power four, but having those great guys in that room. But there are people who look lost on the Wisconsin team in the middle of those games, and that does not say they're being coached up well enough. And I've heard whispers here and there. What are y'all's thoughts? Connor, I'll start with you. This isn't to bash anyone specifically. I've been, like, for example, Jeff Grimes. You weren't going to find a bigger Jeff Grimes cheerleader than I was when he got hired, and I still think he's a very talented coach. The fit has been weird. He's had some things to deal with quarterbacks. But Connor, what's your vibe on whether Wisconsin has enough coaching talent, positional coaching talent, to compete like they used to?
Yeah, it's a great question. I wrote an article today kind of breaking down the Fickle tenure, and one of the things I did talk about was I think a big issue when coming to Wisconsin is that Luke Fickell didn't keep the consistent identity that he had at Cincinnati and bring it over to Wisconsin. He ran a very pro-style, multiple-style offense with Mike Denbrock, and I know Mike Denbrock left a year before Fickell left, and Gino Guidugli was the offensive coordinator at Cincinnati, but still switching offensive systems the second you get to a new place doesn't feel like a recipe for success, in my opinion, especially during the transfer portal era. So I don't even know if it's necessarily a coaching issue. Now, what I will say, though, is I think that he might have done some overcorrection, because what happened with the Phil Longo saga was that he brought in a guy that didn't really fit the program, and even what I think Fickell wanted himself. I think he wanted to modernize the offense, but didn't realize that air raid only works at specific schools, and I don't think any school in the Big Ten, for that matter, could work with air raid. It's just not how the conference is built. So I think with the Grimes hire, he hired someone that was almost too end around heavy and stuff like that, because now we've seen the first couple games were kind of interesting when it comes to offensive stuff, but by the Alabama game, you saw them seeing right through the play calls where Treshke Kahuna be coming around on an end around, and they completely just eat it up, because it feels like after a while their play designs get just a little bit stale. So I do think that there are some coaching issues when it comes to, I guess, the certain hires he's made here, but I do think there's some coaches that have made some very impressive marks, like Jordan Reed, for example, the wide receivers coach. He's done an excellent job with recruiting, and I think the wide receivers this year have done a good job of getting open and making plays when the ball's in their hands. So I do think that there are some bright spots on this coaching staff. It's just, I don't think there's enough bright spots to trump the glaring issues in the coaching staff without naming names. So I do think that there are some issues that might be too late for Fickell to fix at this point.
Yeah, that's sort of, I think you're being real, but it's very disappointing. And again, this is not the single people out show, but I will say, I think to be honest and to have some integrity, I got to be laying out what I'm thinking. I know there have been injuries across the offensive line. Losing Haywood, who's a great kid and a super talented player, was a big, terrible thing to happen before the season started. But man, even with young guys playing, I know we have 3 redshirt freshmen on that line. We got some senior guys too, who with a lot of experience, and I just feel like that is the one throbbing, glaring part of the team. The secondary hasn't been great either, but then I just go, are we coaching these kids up? Would a Joe Rudolph coach line look like that? Or I don't. I could be completely off on this, but and this isn't, again, I'm not trying to attack a coach, but we're trying to be honest about what the situation is. And I have very little health, even getting Renfro back totally healthy and having everyone as healthy as can be. I just haven't seen anything that makes me think that line's going to be okay this year. Ergo, the running game's not going to be okay this year. Am I being too pessimistic? Collin, what do you think? What's your vibe on this?
Yeah, I think your vibe is correct. The tough part as a player is when you have turnover of coaches. I mean, some of these guys had Joe Rudolph as an offensive line coach, Bob Bostad. I mean, you have guys who are on their third, fourth O-line coach since they've been there, right? And when you don't have a consistent position coach teaching you the same thing over and over, let alone going from the air raid back into a new system, it's hard to develop guys and get them ready to play fast when you have that inconsistency of coaching. And there's a few other positions that have bounced around with position coaches, and I've been a part of that, not at Wisconsin but at Houston. And then when I got to Wisconsin, the consistency of coaches being there was huge for my development, because I was getting the same coaching year after year. I knew what I could get better at. I knew what I was going to be coached when I made mistakes, when I did something well. I started to get more consistent just because I had a coach there year after year teaching me the same things. That's challenging when you have multiple coaches teaching you different things. And then when it comes to position coaches in general, when you had Paul Chryst there, again, I'm not comparing in a way that, Chryst over Fickle in any way, but the consistency of coaches who wanted to be there and who played there. We had so many on staff that wanted to go back there because they wanted to better the program. That's not common in college football. When you have a normal college football staff, these position coaches are trying to jump to the next promotion more times than not. They're not there to be in the long haul. So your intention to coach guys may not be there as well. So that there's some issues that maybe we don't even think about when it comes to the development of what these guys are hearing day in, day out that we don't know.
Yeah, I get that. That makes a lot of sense. And sometimes that's not the first thing in fans' minds when they just see, is it working or is it not working? And some of the behind the scenes stuff, they're not quite as tuned on. Connor, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think to Collin's point as well, I think that the college football landscape has shifted in a way where a lot of these coaches have become more recruiters than developmental. And I think that might be the case a lot with some of the people on staff here, because Luke Fickell has been prided as one of the best recruiters in college football. And he's done a pretty good job here, I think, when it comes to bringing talent in. The issue is it feels like a lot of the talent that he brings in will stay there for a year and doesn't go through the necessary development to be ready to be the next man up the next year after. And I think that I don't know if that's an issue with all of college football now, because recruiting has become, I think, even more important than development at this point, just because of the transfer portal and stuff like that. But it feels like, especially with the players they brought in, high school recruits at least, feels like a lot of them come in with a lot of 4 stars, 3 stars, a lot of these high praise, and they come in and they're just not ready up to the standards that the Big Ten needs, just because there's other places of focus they have to worry about, such as NIL and recruiting. And again, I'm not sure if this is this coaching staff issue or if it's all college football issue, but I think finding a healthy balance between the two is going to be important, whether that be under Fickle or under the next coach, whenever that may be.
Well said. I'm going to cut to the punch here. We got a few minutes left. We'll get you out of here. Does Wisconsin win another game this season? Connor, start with you.
I go back and forth on it just because I've watched a lot of games of teams like Iowa and Minnesota, and I think Wisconsin has the talent to beat both those teams. My issue is I'm trying to see a world where I think the motivation and the dedication to win those kind of games is there for the players, not just the coaching staff. And I think there's a very decent chance they win another game this year, and it's hard for me to say. So I will say yes, just because I feel like with how high profile Luke Fickell is, I think he's going to be under the microscope the rest of the season. And if he wants to have a job sooner rather than later in college football, if he wants to continue to keep doing that, I feel like you can't start 2-0 and then end off losing 10 straight games. That is not a look you want to have. So I do think they'll win one game, most likely home against Iowa or at Minnesota, but I would not be surprised if they didn't win another game, just because of it feels like the motivation on the team's unraveling and maybe the locker room's not there. And it feels like people might start just checking out at a point, which is not the mentality you need in college football, but it might be the mentality of this team.
Certainly feels like the mentality of a lot of Wisconsin fans, which you do not want to see in September, let alone in October or November. One thing, it wouldn't be a win on paper for Fickle, but if he stopped wearing the TEAM Sure, I think there would be his approval rating with the fans would go up. Like, can we get some Grit Factory stuff over to him, Colin? Maybe we can, I know that would be a callback, but maybe there's something we can do there.
If it takes flooding them with Grit Factory merch, then they need to call me. We'll make it happen.
We could do worse, certainly. Well, kind of, we just heard Connor's thoughts on this, Colin. What are you thinking? I mean, is this a team that can win multiple football games the rest of the way? I know it's impossible to predict this. We're predicting something 2 full months before it happens in some cases, but you've seen the schedule. You know what we're up against. The weakest team we play in the Big Ten just happened.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. It's a hard conversation to have in September when you're talking about if we're going to win another football game, and that's where we're at, right? There's no product on the field where we can believe that we're going to win some of these games, right, or any of these games. And Maryland was the time to prove that, to give fans and to give some people some hope that we can compete in this conference this year. But like Connor said, I think it's going to come down to these 2 main games of Iowa and Minnesota. I think those are the most highly motivated games, which as a player, you should be motivated to win every game, and you should be excited as hell to play the top teams in the country and go hit them in the mouth and make them earn your respect. But when you have Iowa and Minnesota, 2 games that you could not succeed at last year, there's got to be some sort of revenge, and it comes down to their motivation. And how do they coach and the importance of the rivalry games and trophy games that are really, I mean, they're program reflecting. I mean, you see those trophies every day when you walk in the locker room if you win them, and if you lose them, you see that empty every day in the locker room. So having that motivation to get the pig back, get the axe back, I mean, that's going to be huge in order for Fickle too to say, hey, we may not have had the season that we wanted, but we won our rivalry games, which is a big deal in the state of Wisconsin, right? So I think that's going to be a really big deal. And the odds are stacked against us the rest of the season, but as a mentality, as a player, whether you like Coach Fickle or not, as a player, whether you're still riding for him or not, you got to find a way to do it with the boys that you're with in that locker room and find motivation, find an identity, whether it's being the underdog the rest of the year and embracing that and being pissed off at the world. If that's what it takes, then do it. If you want to be pissed off at me for how I talk about this team, if you use that as motivation to go win, do it. We all want what's best for the program. We want Wisconsin to win games. So, they got to find it in themselves, though, to get that done.
Amen. Look, if it takes Collin Wilder, Connor Whelan, or Scary Alvarez diss tracking these teams a little bit to get them, I'm hoping that's not what it takes. But if it, the point is the point is if it takes people doubting them to flip that switch, hey man, I'm all for it. Whatever flip, this is sports. Sports psychology is a booming business for a reason. There was an entire character on a series about a soccer team in England who was a sports psychologist, who was a major character. This is not Ted Lasso. But we'll see what happens. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up here, and this is the part where they ask the toughest question at the very end. And Connor, I'm going to start with you. Who's the head football coach for the Wisconsin Badgers at the start of the 2026 season? And not the name, but is it going to be Luke Fickell?
That's a tough question. I think it depends on. I think if you get to 5 wins this year, which I know we've talked about is not very possible, but if you get to there, I think he gives himself a little bit of a leash. But if he doesn't get to that mark, or at least if he doesn't win the Iowa and Minnesota games, both of those, I don't think he's the head coach. And I know that buyout is a monster buyout, but I just can't see a world where they go into a 4th year, even though the schedule gets a little bit easier in 2026. I just still don't think it makes a ton of sense to give the guy a 4th year, even if I think he's gotten a little bit unlucky when it comes to even injuries. And I will give him a lot of credit for that, where you've had to go through a lot of quarterback. You have to go to your backup quarterback in 3 straight seasons. That's not easy to do. But I feel like if you give Luke Fickell a 4th year without him proving much in year 3, I don't understand how you can see results change in that year 4. You have to have something to build off on in year 3. And if you're at rock bottom, I don't see how you can build off of that. So I think it depends on how he ends the season. If he ends with a triumphant win in Minnesota to win back the Axe, there's a very decent chance just because of the buyout. But with coaches like Jason Eck with Wisconsin ties floating around the coaching candidate circles, I just don't think they can go to a year 4 of Luke Fickell.
Yeah, and really quick before I get to Colin on this one, and again, this is not me being a legal scholar of any sort, but we talk about buyouts and things like that. Just for the basic fan to understand, Fickle is not the kind. I don't see him doing the thing that Chris did. He's not going to go in on a desert island and grow a beard, and not coach a lot after he's gone. Fick will want to get right back in the game again, and so he gets another job. There's some formula with offset where that money would come off Wisconsin's tab. You don't get double paid. That's not how it works. There's some guaranteed money, but so it's not quite as apocalyptic financially as some people think. And obviously it'll involve Chris McIntosh too. These two might be tied like a 3-legged race together. Might be one and the other. But Colin, it's mid-December of 2025. The season's over. There's no bowl game for the Badgers again. Who's the coach at 1440 Monroe Street for the Wisconsin Badgers?
A little bit like what Connor said. I mean, you have to, if you're Luke Fickell, you got to prove that you can compete at least in these games to have a chance to be still the head coach going into the next year. But also it could be Chris McIntosh wanting to die on this hill that he created, right? I mean, he might be wanting to ride this out and really give this a chance and have one more set of hope. And, if you he could put his pride to the side and see that, that this was not the hire that he expected or that he was expecting to have with success and, make a change. But, it depends on who's the hot hand right now, going into to be a new head coach as well, or to be another head coach here at Wisconsin. Like who's the hot name that we can also think about and that would be a good fit and that would fit the program well. There's a lot of factors that go into it. Obviously too, what can we afford? Can we afford business-wise to fire Luke Fickell at the end of the season? But I think if you completely lose the locker room by the end of this season, you have a new head coach in 2026. I think
that's more than fair. I think taking a different position would be unfair to the program, the fans, looping back on one thing about Jimmy Leonard, and I don't know if he would ever even pick a phone up again. I said, and it was sincere, and you can go back and check my work on this. I was just absolutely great with Leonard when he was the assistant, stepping up for Paul a few years back with him taking over the program. But I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say there weren't some red flags with Jim as a head coach, CEO type in the new environment that we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, though. Recruiting is not his favorite thing. He loves to coach. He's as you know, Colin, he's an X and O guy who has relationships, and that's why he's so great. And I did have some, looking back now at how weird this has been with money and transfer portal, I do have some concerns that it would have been a very challenging thing when Wisconsin was on the downslope a little bit there, talent-wise and otherwise, given all the COVID stuff. So I want to just be real with that, because there are a lot of fans screaming at me in my mentions. We call Jim Leonard up and say we're sorry and get him right back in the room. I don't think that we should take that as the only solution. I think it would have to be a large. It wouldn't be called the Denver Broncos and ask for their secondaries coach, and that's the only interview we would do. We would have to look, and maybe it's Eck, maybe it's someone else. But I asked the question. I'm going to get back to the question. I'm kind of along the same lines as y'all. I think there's a reasonable chance it could be someone else if it doesn't go well. But I'm going to root just as hard for the Wisconsin Badgers the rest of the season as I have always. I want them to win every game. I don't care if they have 2 wins going into Minneapolis. Getting that axe will be everything to me. I mean, that's just watching them. Giving PJ Flack, Freudian slip, Fleck the axe 4 out of 5 years, guys, unacceptable. There's no universe where that's okay. So I guess there's not a lot to lose now in terms of like the Wisconsin fandom. We already have seen the crater. There could be lower lows as the games go on, but no one expects this team to be good this year. And who knows? I'm going to keep it could be wished on a prayer, but or living on a prayer. That's thematic. That's bookending. But anyway, thank you both so much for jumping on. And, there are more of us in this room now than in the student section with 2 minutes left in that game when we saw that last touchdown for the Badgers. But we'll keep our chins up and, thanks again for coming on, and we'll see what happens. It's going to be an interesting fall.
Scary, thanks for having us. Really appreciate it. Glad we can talk ball and Badgers.
Same here, Scary. Really appreciate it.